Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Human Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. I didn't cry at the church because the organ kept missing notes. It's hard to weep to a hymn that limps. The pews were mostly empty, a scatter of coats, 7 people if you counted Mr. Givens from the funeral home who stood like a coat rack. Salt crusted the boots by the door. The flowers on the altar were already listing. That's Riverside for you, polite, efficient, and quick to step around someone else's grief. I don't blame the town. I don't even blame the weather. Grief sits the way February sits on Ohio, heavy gray, and nobody's fault. 3 weeks later, I was under a chandelier at Maple Ridge Country Club while a bow-tied server stacked champagne coupes. A brass script sign read, Ava and Preston. The room smelled like lemon polish and money. Through the windows, the frozen fairway lay like a starched tablecloth. Linda spotted me and switched on the smile she uses for raffles and photos. Evelyn, she said the way people in town say your name when they're about to loan it to a roomer. She pressed my hands. I'm so glad you came. A DJ tried to make an announcement over a squealing microphone. The Whitmores arrived in a tide of navy suits. Someone introduced me to Preston's mother. She complimented my brooch. Outside the parking lot glittered with salt and the last stubborn patches of snow at dusk. Come outside, a second, Linda said, steering me toward the balcony. Her perfume carried vanilla and insistence. Ava wants this day to be perfect. And perfect, well, it has a budget. There it was. She didn't say the number first. She talked about signature cocktails and a clear-sided tent. Then she said, as if we were discussing church lilies, the fun Noah left Evelyn. It's just sitting. Just sitting. I repeated like a person repeating the diagnosis to make sure the syllables didn't change. $300,000. His deployment pay, his savings, the overtime from the clinic, the pieces of a life that never asked for attention and now had nothing but. Linda touched my sleeve. It would mean the world to Ava. The Whitmores have expectations. We can do it tastefully. We could even frame it as honoring Noah. I looked out at the frozen course where a groundskeeper drove a cart with a broom on the back, pushing frost into neat lines. It isn't a story, I said. It's money for kids who need to get from here to a hospital and back to algebra without falling behind. I hadn't meant to say that much. Linda's smile held. Families help family first. After the wedding, there will be gifts. We can replenish the account. A server passed with a tray of Buckeye's peanut butter balls dipped in chocolate to look like the state tree. I took one and didn't taste it. In the next room, Ava floated past in an ivory dress you rent by the hour for photographs. She saw me and made a small lift of the chin that said, rescue me, or maybe don't. She was always good at silence. By the time the cake came out, a white thing with sugar flowers bracing against wind, I had used up all the small talk I owned. I left before the toasts, stepping into air that smelled of exhaust, and took the long way home by the river. The Bluebird Diner's neon coffee cup flickered. The river ran dark as a belt through town, pulling the cold along. Teenagers practiced donuts in the high school lot. Riverside kept doing what it did, moving. The flag on my porch knocked a quiet rhythm against the pole. I set the kettle on, fed the cat, and opened the narrow drawer where I keep warranties, spare bulbs, things you do not want to loot. The drawer sticks in summer and glides in winter. Tonight it opened as if it knew the way. That's where the letter lived, Noah's left-handed scrawl on the envelope postmarked last summer when we still argued about replacing tires or brakes. I had read it before, but the paper still felt warm, the way some pages refused to cool. He wrote plainly. He named 2 children from the clinic who missed chemo because the bus didn't run on Sundays. He listed hospital miles like math problems. He underlined tutors. He sketched a box Midwest Children's Alliance arrows to travel stipends and after-school catch-up. He drew little squares for buses and circles for waiting rooms, as if the map might behave if he diagrammed it. There was a smudge on the margin, a fingerprint in coffee or ketchup proof that even planning can be interrupted by life. He didn't make speeches or imagine headlines. He gave me a list in a tone that sounded exactly like him, ordinary, firm kind. My coffee went cold while I traced his underlines the way you trace a scar you've learned to keep. The kettle began its thin whistle. The house ticked. Down the block, a dog barked once, then stopped. I folded the letter along the same crease and slid it back into the drawer. The porch boards held the day's cold. The flag kept time. I turned off the kitchen light. The window gave me back a small version of the room, the table, the chair, the empty mug, the drawer that closes without complaint. By morning, the kitchen light felt thin as skim milk. I poured coffee and watched steam ladder up the window. The letter was back in the drawer. I put on my coat and drove to the Bluebird because grief sits easier in a room with clatter. The bell over the door hiccuped. Tom waved me to the corner booth where the vinyl seat sighed. Carol was cutting a slice of lemon pie into triangles as if fairness could be served. Tom said, steadying his voice on my name, "Sit a minute." Tash poured coffee without asking. "You look like you need something hot," she said and slid a plate toward me. Tom smoothed the paper placemat. "We've been thinking about practicalities, taxes, keeping things safe." He glanced at Carol. "No one wants to take it from children," Carol said, "but money sitting in a checking account, well, it loses value. Family can be a bridge. After the wedding we could—" She let the sentence evaporate. "The money has a job," I said. "It isn't shopping for one." Tom grimaced. "There's chatter online. Folks are worried you're carrying this alone." He coughed. "Riverside moms. Of course it was them. They can turn a bake sale into a criminal inquiry." I said nothing. Tash slid a receipt under my cup. On the back she'd written, "Call me if you need rides." The diner runs a soft network stricter than any algorithm. Tom pushed across a brochure printed in the bank's gray-blue trust options for peace of mind. "Guardrails," he said. I tucked it into my purse. "Guardrails are fine," I said, "but the road still goes where it goes." At the register, a church acquaintance hugged me. "We're praying," she said, which in Riverside also means we're watching. In the car, my neighbor Margot had sent screenshots of thread in Riverside Moms, anonymous voice asking how to help an older relative manage a large account after a recent loss. The comments bloomed with advice and appetite. I drove to Main Street and climbed the stairs to Nina Caldwell's office over the insurance agency. The hallway smelled like mint from when the space was a dentist. Nina met me with a legal pad and shoes you can run in. "Let me see the papers," she said. I set the folder down, bank statements, Noah's letter, the memorandum naming the fund and its purpose. Nina read without sighs, only the tick of her pen. "He was precise," she said. "Travel stipends and tutoring. Alliance as partner, not owner. You as administrator." She tapped the letter. "This isn't a will, but alongside the bank documents it's a map. Linda wants the wedding to look like love," I said. "The Whitmores want it to look like them." "The law likes instructions," Nina said. "You're performing what's written." She flagged statutes with orange notes. "If anyone challenges your capacity, refer them to me. And don't answer strangers online." We reviewed dates and signatures. She underlined 3 lines and slid the page back. "Accuracy is your task," she said, "not theater." When I left, the courthouse clock told the half hour. In the car, a new message lit from Ava. "Hi, Evelyn. Can I ask you something private?" "Yes," I wrote. "Mom says using the fund is honoring Noah." "Is that true? I feel sick signing vendor checks that cost more than rent." I typed, "The fund is for kids who need buses and tutors, not for centerpieces," then softened it. "The fund has a specific purpose. What do you want?" She sent a photo of a spreadsheet vendors deposits, a column labeled Whitmore Family Expectations. Upgrades were circled: band, dance floor, a sculpture. "Preston says his parents will be embarrassed if we don't measure up," she wrote. "I like the chapel by the lake. Or the courthouse." I told her to eat something and offered to meet later in the week. She replied, "Please don't tell Mom." I said I wouldn't. At the grocery, I passed 2 Riverside moms comparing fundraisers like recipes. I kept the receipt. When I got home, Linda's SUV was at the curb. She stood on my stoop under the flag. "You went to Nina," she said. "I did," I said. "She's a lawyer. Lawyers read. You're making us look like villains." I didn't invite a crowd to look. Her mouth trembled and steadied. "Ava deserves a good beginning. The Whitmores will match whatever we put in." "What you put in," I said. She blinked, and for a second I saw the girl who used to borrow my sweaters. "You're cruel," she said, and walked to her car. Dusk slid down the street. I warmed soup and ate standing at the sink. The phone buzzed Margot again, a grainy photo from across town. A tow truck sat in front of Linda's house, hazards painting the snow orange. The hood of Linda's car yawned. I called Ava. She picked up on the second ring. Behind her, drawers opened and shut. "I'm here," she said. Through the receiver came the metallic cough of a chain. "Do you need me to come?" I asked. "No," she said. "Just stay on." A second photo arrived. The chain went taut. The car lifted by inches, tires sighing as they left the salted street. Ava didn't cry. She described it like weather-hot metal, the neighbor's porch light flicking on her mother at the window with her hands braced on the sill. "Mom says it's a mistake," she said, voice worn smooth. "She says there's a check in the mail." We listened to the truck ratchet the car into place. I could hear Ava's breath, counted and careful. "Eat when they're gone," I said. "Toast if nothing else." "Okay." The hazard lights clicked. The night settled around them and around me. I stood at the sink with the phone against my cheek and watched my porch flag lift, fall lift small and committed like work. No one notices until it stops. I didn't sleep much after the tow truck left its orange blink in my head. Morning came with that dull tin-lid light Ohio keeps in February. I wiped the counter, fed the cat, and waited for the clock to heave itself past 10. Ava texted a pin a consignment place 2 towns over called Second Story Bridal over a laundromat and a nail bar. "Less eyes," she wrote. The shop had a bell that sounded like a teaspoon against a glass. Fluorescent tubes hummed. Dresses hung along 2 walls lace, turning to netting satin, turning to paper, all of it, the white of old snowbanks. A woman with a tape measure around her neck greeted us the way you greet fragile boxes. Ava ran her hand along a rack, stopping at a simple sheath with a bateau neck. No corset, she said almost to herself. No rhinestones. I want to breathe. She hugged it to her chest, then laughed like she'd surprised herself. In the mirrored corner, she changed behind a curtain that didn't quite meet. I sat on a padded bench where long ago mothers must have cried and watched my reflection make peace with the lighting. When Ava stepped out, the dress found her without arguments. It wasn't a spectacle. It fit the way a memory fits, unshowy and sure. She stood with her hands absently smoothing her sides. I can walk in this, she said. I can sit. You can eat cake, I said. She smiled at the floor, then at me. The country club smelled like lemons and men's cologne, she said. This place smells like starch and hand soap. The seamstress pinned the hem mouth full of straight pins, and Ava kept still without turning brittle. Out the window, a man carried a bag of laundry that steamed in the cold. The laundromat door swung shut with authority. When she changed back, Ava folded the dress as if it belonged to a friend who had trusted her. At the register, she hesitated, then put down her own card. If I don't like it later, I can bring it back, she told the clerk, though the sign said all sales final. In the parking lot, Wayne shouldered across the asphalt. Ava tucked the garment bag into her trunk and leaned on the edge long enough to let the choice settle. At the tasting last week, she said Preston kept calling everything entry level. The salad, the chairs. She mimed quotation marks without humor. He said, my family has standards. I kept thinking you mean preferences. The cold climbed my sleeves. I reached into my purse and slid out a business card I'd been turning over since the holidays, Elise Monroe, Ph.D. She takes early mornings and lunch hours, I said. Tash at the diner sees her. She doesn't ask you to become a different person. Ava turned the card between her fingers like a subway token. Mom says therapy is for people who don't have lists, she said. Mom has lists? You get to make your own, I said. She tucked the card into her wallet and looked at me as if she'd set a small stone down. Thank you, she said. Don't tell Mom. I won't. Back in Riverside, I pulled into the Bluebird because Habit People watches for you. Tash was refilling ketchup bottles with a focus that could tune a piano. I had just wrapped my hands around a mug when a woman I didn't know paused by my booth and touched the tabletop with 2 fingers. Evelyn Carter, she asked. She had newsroom posture and the kind of coat you buy at an outlet because it looks like a better coat. Dana Price, Herald Ledger. May I sit? I nodded. Tash set down another mug like a referee between boxers. Dana opened a folder with a practice flap. I'm working on a story about a cluster of donor-advised funds and family foundations in the county, she said, voice low enough to keep it local. The Whitmore Foundation appears in several filings. I'm trying to understand a couple of patterns. Paper slid my way, photocopied Form 990 pages with yellow flags. Related party transactions, one note read. Consultant retainer family office, read another. A third flagged vendor reimbursements events with numbers that looked like the blood pressure of a worried person. I'm not here to ask you for commentary on your family, Dana said. But I need someone who understands the difference between a fundraiser and a photograph. I make tuna casserole, I said. That's the extent of my event management. She smiled fast, then went back to steady. There's a habit of calling luxury expenses donor cultivation, she said, tapping a line item. Hotels, private rooms, travel. That's allowed within reason. The numbers here aren't reasonable. I read a page twice. What do you need from me? Nothing you don't wish to give, Dana said. If you have the fund's purpose in writing, that matters. If you've been pressured to repurpose it for optics, that matters less to me than to you. But it adds color. I thought about Linda's vanilla insistence on the balcony and the way the groundskeeper's broom made Frost behave for a moment. I have Noah's letter, I said, and bank documents. Dana sipped her coffee like a person who had taught herself to like it black. Keep copies safe, she said. Also, a heads up, when big families feel their name on a headline, they get louder. Loudness is not accuracy. She slid a card across. If anyone waives confidentiality or tells you everybody does this, let me see the sentence. A bell dinged in the kitchen. Grease and onions rolled through the room. Dana gathered her pages. I'll be in touch, she said, then corrected herself. I'll be around. She left without looking like she was leaving fast. After lunch, I drove to the high school because the sky had broken open into a brittle blue that makes bleachers look like a place to have thoughts. The field gate was latched but not locked. I pushed through the chain swinging like an apology. The scoreboard loomed dark and faithful. From the equipment shed came the smell of rubber and cut grass long dead. Noah had coached JV here the year after he came back, the summer he grew a beard because he could. He bought a whistle cheap at a flea market and walked the sideline as if nobody needed to be impressive to be worth the air. I stood where he used to stand and let the wind carry the ghost of his whistle, 2 notes and a clap. You can hear things when the town is off doing its errands. I sat on the bottom row and took the letter from my pocket without unfolding it. The paper made its soft declaration against my palm. Cars murmured on the far road. A truck downshifted like a preacher clearing his throat. I traced the crease with my thumb and let my shoulders find a lower place. The scoreboard blacked out the sun just enough to keep me from squinting. My phone buzzed. "Ava, can you talk?" I called. Her voice arrived thin like it had squeezed through a brass keyhole. "We're at the tasting," she said. I could hear clinked forks, the half-laugh of salespeople, a saxophone noodling on a speaker. Preston keeps saying brand alignment and deliverables. He's talking about marriage. She was quiet for a breath, then another. "I hit record by accident earlier," she said, a little rush of air on the word accident. I set my phone on the table to look at a swatch, and my thumb must have anyway. I didn't say anything. I just let it sit. A muffled passage of voices came through the ambient bump of a room spending money. Then her whisper, "I'm going to send you a clip. Don't tell Mom." The text landed a voice memo under a minute. I put her on speaker and pressed play. Preston's voice came out round and certain. "Once things are official, everything consolidates," he said. "My parents' guy sets up the accounts. No drama. We fold in what's available so the picture is clean." Another voice, "Ava's barely there." "Fold in what?" "Family money is family money," he said. "Your aunt's been dramatic, but it's optics. We present the Whitmore Foundation numbers to the board next quarter. They'll like seeing scale. It's win-win." Silverware chimed. Someone apologized for a spill as if for a small sin. I ended the recording and picked the phone back up. "Are you safe?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "I'm at a table in a room full of people who think chicken needs adjectives." "Eat something," I said. "I had a roll," she said. "It tasted like a towel." On the field, a gust threw grit against the bleachers. I tucked the phone under my chin and stood the cold making the metal ring. Down on the sideline, paint flaked from the yard lines into pieces the wind could carry. "I can leave early," Ava said. "They won't notice. There's a dessert course with smoke." "You can leave when you want," I said. She exhaled. I could hear chairs scrape, a server say, "Excuse me, ladies." There was a bright professional laugh, Preston's mother's maybe, and then just Ava's breath again, even and counting. "I'll call you after," she said. We hung up. I stayed where I was until the light thinned and the scoreboard became a simple rectangle. The letter warmed in my pocket like a small animal you hold until it stops shaking. When I walked back to the gate, the chain knocked the post twice, polite as a question, and let me through. By late afternoon, the sky had the color of a bruise fading. I drove from the field to Nina's office with grit still ticking in the wheel wells. She'd spread the conference table with neat stacks bank statements, the memorandum naming the fund, a one-page summary of its scope written in Nina's square hand, a printout of Noah's letter with the coffee smudge circled not for drama, only to mark that it existed in the world. Beside those sat a packet on letterhead from Midwest Children's Alliance, minutes from a board call last fall, a pilot proposal for travel stipends and tutoring hours. They read like people trying to make the practical holy. Nina clicked a capped pen against her chin. "Capacity is the only door Hale can try," she said. "He'll argue grief dulls judgment. He'll ask for a temporary restraining order so you can't move money without the court's permission." "I haven't moved a cent," I said. "That helps," she said. "So does purpose. Judges like verbs." She slid over a slim folder labeled Exhibits AF. A was the bank's account agreement. B, the memorandum. C, the alliance minutes. D, my appointment as administrator. E, receipts from the small disbursements Noah had made before he died, gas cards for 2 families. A check to a tutoring center that still had a hand-lettered sign. F, a short affidavit I'd signed that morning, notaries and dates clean as a kitchen. I set my purse on the floor. "There's also a recording," I said, and told her about the tasting. The word consolidates the way Ava's voice had thinned. Nina's eyes flattened, then focused. "You have it." I held up the phone. She took it with 2 fingers like a scalpel and listened twice once, eyes closed once, watching the wall. "We'll offer it if Hale makes the fund's purpose sound like suggestion," she said. "We're not leading with spectacle. The courthouse in winter is a second high school. Everyone passes everyone twice." The hallway smelled like dust and ballpoint ink. On the way in, we passed Dana Price leaning against a soda machine, reading a PDF off her phone, the kind of glow that makes a person look both older and truer. She glanced up, gave the brief nod of a person who's in the building for the building, not for you. In courtroom 3, the seal hung above the bench, a bald eagle who had put in its time. Judge Ramirez entered without pomp robe, plain glasses on a chain. The bailiff called the case. Victor Hale stood for the petitioners, Linda Barrett, and listed as interested parties, Preston Whitmore Jr. and Whitmore Foundation, which landed like a boot in a cake. Nina rose beside me. Hale took to the podium as if it had been waiting for him. Your Honor, he began. We asked for a narrowly tailored order to preserve assets and for an evaluation of Mrs. Carter's capacity to administer them. We're concerned about the erratic stewardship of a substantial account in the wake of a devastating loss. He gestured towards the CR table with professional gentleness. This is not adversarial. It is protective. He lifted a sheaf. Exhibit 1, Community Concern. Dozens of communications to the family asking how to help Mrs. Carter manage new responsibilities, some noting confusion about the fund's parameters. He didn't say Riverside moms, but the printouts wore the fonts of that kingdom. Exhibit 2. Evidence that the fund lacks formal restrictions beyond Mrs. Carter's personal preferences. There is no registered trust instrument, no board, no independent oversight. He paused for the weight of empty chairs. Finally, Exhibit 3, evidence that using charitable events for family milestones is common practice in our county and beyond. He smiled as if he were declaring casseroles wholesome. A wedding that honors a beloved relative's memory is a community good. Nina stood with no flourishes. Your Honor, we'll start where law starts writing. She lifted our memorandum. The account was opened with a stated purpose: travel stipends for pediatric oncology patients and tutoring support for school reentry. The bank agreement names Mrs. Carter as administrator of those funds for those purposes. We have already provided the court with correspondence from the partner nonprofit, Midwest Children's Alliance, acknowledging scope and outlining a pilot. She let the pages breathe. This is not a donor-advised fund. It is a restricted purpose charitable account. It is not held in the air by sentiment. It is held by paper. She laid Noah's letter on the podium without pushing it forward. This is not legally dispositive, she said before Hale could object, but it illuminates the intent of the person whose labor funded the account buses and books, not ballrooms. Hale stepped in. With respect, counsel is laundering preference as purpose. Absent a formal trust, Mrs. Carter's interpretation is just that, and she is... He let a beat gather sympathy, bereaved. Nina's face didn't change. Capacity is not measured by whether a person is sad, she said. It is measured by whether a person can understand information and make decisions consistent with established aims. Mrs. Carter has not only understood, she has complied. Ramirez leaned an elbow on the bench. Any evidence that the administrator has spent for personal benefit, she asked. No, Your Honor, Hale said smoothly. We came early to prevent missteps. Any evidence that petitioners have a legal interest in the fund? Ramirez asked. Hale clasped his hands. Only a moral one is family. Ramirez made a note no one could see. All right, she said, proceed. Nina called Ava Barrett not as an opponent, but as a person with knowledge. Ava walked to the stand in a dark sweater and told the truth as if it were laundry that the fund had been discussed as a way to elevate the wedding, that she had asked if that matched Noah's wishes, that she had bought her own dress secondhand. She did not say the word postpone. She wasn't performing. Did anyone else discuss the fund's use with you? Nina asked. Preston, Ava said. Her voice didn't wobble. He said once things were official, everything would consolidate and a family advisor would set up accounts. He said we'd fold in what was available so the picture looked clean. Hale stood. Objection to hearsay, he said, because the script requires it. Nina nodded. We have a recording authenticating the statement she said, made in a public setting voluntarily provided by the witness. Ramirez held out a hand. Play it. Nina set the phone on the counsel table and played the minute-long clip. Preston's voice gate kept the air. Once things are official, everything consolidates. We fold in what's available so the picture is clean. Someone in the back shifted. The word clean kept itself too tidy. Nina also offered a thin stack from Dana Price Public Filings No Mystery Form 990 excerpts, a vendor list that snaked through cousins and a firm labeled family office. Reimbursements categorized as donor cultivation that looked like vacations standing upright in spreadsheets. Hale didn't flinch. Foundations have expenses, he said. People eat at events. Children do too, Nina said, and let it sit there without embroidery. Ramirez turned to Linda. Ms. Barrett, she said, gentle but direct. Did you solicit online donations under the name of your nephew? Linda's eyes glistened too fast. I created a GoFundMe to honor Noah, she said. People asked how to help. I thought community rallying. And where did those donations go? Ramirez asked. Linda swallowed. Into an account for the wedding, she said. The wedding was going to mention Noah raise awareness. She stopped herself on the word awareness as if she had finally heard it the way other people did. Ramirez breathed in once out once. Return those funds to donors or to a cause aligned with the stated purpose, she said. I am not ordering it yet. I am telling you the direction of my thinking. Hale started to object, then thought better. He pivoted. Your Honor, no one here is stealing. Families are messy. We're asking for supervision. Supervision of what Ramirez asked. An administrator who has by your own admission not misapplied funds, or a foundation whose filings raise questions you're not prepared to answer today. Her tone never spiked. It cooled. She looked at Nina. Mrs. Carter, through counsel, will continue to administer the account consistent with its written purpose. No disbursement for events, optics, or any item not directly tied to travel and tutoring for pediatric oncology families. Petition for capacity evaluation is denied without prejudice. Temporary restraining order denied. Parties may revisit governance at a later status if a plan emerges involving the nonprofit partner. The bailiff's pen clicked. Paper rustled like dry leaves. Hale thanked the court with his trained vowels. Nina nodded once. Ramirez stood, and the room rose, and then we were in the hallway again where the soda machine hummed like a polite animal. Linda leaned against a marble pillar and stared at the grout. Ava stood a few feet away, hands around her elbows, ring turned inward. Preston checked his phone and made the face men make when they believe they've been inconvenienced by reality. His mother murmured about reputations. Dana didn't approach. She watched the ceiling's fluorescent light quiver, then walked past me as if we both worked there. Check your email, she said under her breath, not stopping. Public docs only. Nina slid the exhibits back into her briefcase, movements small and exact. Eat something, she said to me in the same voice I had used for Ava. I took one step toward Linda, then another. She looked up, the expression of a person who has gone over a speed bump too fast and is waiting to hear if her Axel forgives her. I didn't know it would go like that, she said. She touched her throat. I thought... She let the thought dissolve. I'm tired of pretending we can afford the pretending. Ava joined us without asking permission from the air. I called the venue on the walk down, she said. Her face had the calm that comes after you move a heavy piece of furniture by yourself. I told them to release the weekend. I'll handle the deposit. Please stop calling it honoring Noah. She said it the way you close a door softly because the baby's asleep. Linda's mouth opened, then closed. She nodded once, emotion traced from some earlier life where she said yes to a teacher. She put a hand to her eye and dabbed, not careful enough to save the mascara. Preston said something about sunk costs and deliverables, and Ava did not look at him. Outside, the cold drew clean lines around everything. The courthouse steps had been salted down to the stone. A bus kneeling at the corner sighed and lifted. I wrapped my scarf and took the stairs slowly, palm on the rail, worn smooth by other people's decisions. At the bottom, Nina's car beeped. I'll draft a short order for the alliance, she said. Paper keeps honest people honest. I'll take care of the rest, I said. She studied me. You already are. We crossed the square. On the lawn, the bronze soldier leaned into a wind that wasn't there. The flag cracked once. I thought of the letter in my coat and of Ava's thumb rubbing the edge of Dr. Monroe's card, not as a vow, only as a small act a person can take that belongs to them. I turned toward Main Street, toward the diner's neon, steaming its coffee into the early dark, and let the door's bell give me away. Tash looked up, brought a bowl of chili without the question, and set a spoon beside it like a quiet, ordinary mercy. The chili steadied my hands enough to carry me home through the early dark. The house met me the way a dog does when it has learned your footsteps. I rinsed the spoon, turned off the porch light, and slept like a person who has been holding a plank over her head and finally sets it down. By midweek, I was back on Main in a conference room at Midwest Children's Alliance, where the carpet had a pattern designed to forgive coffee. Marla Hart, clipboard, warm voice. No perfume walked me through one page at a time. A simple intake. Proof of diagnosis. Gas cards or bus passes, not cash. A small roster of vetted tutors paid directly hour by hour. She called it friction for fraud and ease for everyone else. We signed where yellow flags told us to sign. The copier made its friendly storm. The first two families didn't bring speeches. Shauna wore a sweatshirt with a county fair pig on it and kept her eyes on the form. Her son Eli read the poster about hydration like it might be on a test. Their hospital miles would eat a week's pay. The passes slipped under Shauna's fingers felt like a receipt for ordinary life. A second mom asked if she should return unused rides. Use them, Marla said. We'll print more. At the tutoring center, a strip mall unit between a dance studio and a WE Fix phone sign. Noah's name went on a whiteboard in blue marker under Algebra 1 and Reading Lab. The marker squeaked, bright as a whistle. At home, a card sat in my mailbox with Riverside Community Kitchen letterhead. Linda's handwriting said in its practice slant start date Monday. Part-time hourly. I'll learn the baton pass, not run the parade. A crumpled receipt was tucked inside small refunds to neighbors who had donated in Noah's honor, folded around cash, like a promise that had remembered itself. She didn't call. I didn't either. We are better at side-by-side than face-to-face. Ava began showing up around 8, hair-damp coffee in a travel mug she didn't set down. She said Dr. Monroe's waiting room had a plant that refused to quit and magazines older than some marriages. She doesn't ask me to be brave, Ava said. She asked me to be specific. We didn't discuss the dress in her trunk. It lived there like a story someone else started and left on the porch. The Whitmores sent embossed envelopes that went unopened on the counter until recycling day made a decision for me. Dana Price's bylines slipped into the paper between football scores and zoning hearings, dry columns that used words like related entities and documentation requested. In town, they sold more meatloaf at fundraisers, less champagne. You could feel people learning to count in a new direction. March thawed into mud and then into the kind of blue that makes sidewalks look freshly invented. At the diner, Tash kept a stack of bus schedules by the mints. Kids from the high school lugged clarinets and helmets past my booth. One afternoon, Ava came in wearing a navy windbreaker with auxiliary stitched above the pocket. Paperwork, she said, tapping the badge. Rosters. New member orientations. I like lists when they're mine. On her break, she showed me a photo of the lake looking stern and generous on the same day. Spring took the town by the shoulders and made it stand up straight. The Alliance office learned our names. The pharmacy clerks learned to ring up ginger ale with copays. I learned which families preferred email and which wanted a call they could keep on speaker while they folded laundry. At the tutoring center, Eli underlined denominator with the carefulness of a boy who has decided on the shape of his own neatness. 6 months after the courthouse, a newsletter arrived with my mail folded around itself like good bread. On the front, Noah Carter Fund in a modest font and a row of small numbers that added up to something a person could hold 41 kids, with travel-covered 290 tutoring hours, 17 motel nights for families who couldn't afford to turn around. Inside a photo not of ribbon cuttings, just a bus stop with a mom's hand on a boy's backpack strap and a caption that named no one. I read it at the kitchen table while the kettle discovered first steam. That evening, Ava knocked without rehearsing the sound. She carried an envelope the size of a book. For you, she said, and then corrected herself. For the drawer. Inside was a picture printed on heavy paper, Ava, in a simple white dress that respected her shoulders, standing under a thin line of sky at the edge of the lake. Beside her, a man in a Coast Guard uniform looked like a person who knows the difference between a forecast and water. No tuxedos, no chandeliers, a breeze with opinions. On the back, she'd written only the date. We ate omelets with too much pepper and laughed at nothing big. She said the dress from second story lives on a thrift rack again. She said her apartment smells like lemon oil because she's learning to like clean corners for their own sake. When she left, she took the last of the cinnamon bread and promised to return the plate. People in Riverside always promise to return the plate. Later, I drove to the cemetery with a bunch of grocery store carnations because carnations keep their grip when weather plays tricks. The ground had that give it gets when the frost has almost remembered how to be water. I set the newsletter down against the stone so Noah could look at it the way he used to look at my grocery lists, approving amused. Wind shouldered the oaks. Somewhere far, a freight train threaded the edge of town with the patience of a long sentence. The flag above the veterans section clapped once and rested. I told Noah about Shauna and Eli, about Ava's windbreaker, about Linda washing pans at the community kitchen and coming home with a tired that carried its own permission to sleep. I told him the diner's bell still hiccups and the scoreboard still leans, and that the river keeps its belt-tight pull even when no one is watching. I didn't say goodbye. I don't not here. On the drive back Main Street gave me its familiar sequence pharmacy hardware diner, the window where the cat sleeps afternoons. I parked, wiped road dust off the mailbox with the back of my glove and went inside. The drawer where the letter lives opened without sticking. Paper rustled. The house breathed. I put the newsletter beside his handwriting and closed the drawer with my palm flat on the wood until the click found itself. The porch flag hit the pole once, then settled, keeping time I didn't have to count. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.